Hello everyone, welcome to 28th lecture of the course, which is the last lecture of the course. In the previous lecture, we summed up some part of the discussion that we had in this course. And in today's lecture, we'll sum up the rest of the things and also we'll recapitulate the exercises that we did in this course. So we are going to sum up the remaining part of the lectures. So we saw that the role of human being in this existence is to understand the coexistence and to live in coexistence, isn't it? So we could see that coexistence is central to this existence, and all that we need to do is to understand it and live accordingly, isn't it? And to make it more expressive, we say that coexistence, harmony, and relationship has to be understood and to be lived accordingly. So we can say that the role of human being in this whole existence is just to understand the coexistence, harmony, and relationship and to live accordingly. And this is what is going to be described in the following slides. So we could see human conduct in its completeness as we discussed one formulation of the human conduct. The second formulation, if you remember, we talked about value, policy, and character. And the first formulation, we looked at the activities of the self and tried to look at the role of human being based on right understanding, right feeling, and right thought. So we can see that on one end, we are able to realize the whole existence as coexistence when we are able to see the submergence of nature in space. And this organizes all the activities in the self. So we can see in the diagram here how the harmony flows in the self, isn't it? So based on realization, the authentication gets complete and then the understanding gets complete, and it is followed by the completeness of other activities in the self. And thus there is activity completeness in the self. And this reflects as behavior, work, and participation. And when it goes as an expression outside, we are able to participate in the universal human order, making the human tradition. So this is the complete meaning of human conduct. So presently, we can see that we have not been able to realize coexistence, and hence we are not able to live accordingly. So what do we do now? So to address this particular need, we took up exercises in our course. So we have been trying to work on this particular thing in our course UHV 3. So to understand what to do as a human being, we went through lectures 1 to 28. And then we did some practice through exercises 1 and 2. So we had practice sessions 1 to 14. And now we can recall that this is what we have been trying to work upon in exercises 1 and 2. And this is what is preparing our base for exercise 3. Now, if you look at the conduct when we are ascending from lower to the higher activities of the self, one starts from expectation, isn't it? And in expectation, one starts from selecting, goes to testing, and then one is able to develop analyzing, then comparing, and then imaging. And here comes the transformation when we are able to enter block B1, isn't it? So this is the transformation that takes place in the self. And then we are able to awaken to the higher activities of contemplation, understanding, determination, authentication, realization. And when the realization takes place, we are able to see the submergence of the whole nature in space. So the previous diagram that you saw was the conduct when the activity completeness has taken place. All the activities of the self are activated, are awakened. But when we are going to develop the self through our study, through our practice, then this is the process that we have to go through, isn't it? So earlier we move from bottom to top, and when the realization is ensured, then we move from top to bottom. So both the processes have to be understood, isn't it? So when the realization is there, then based on realization, all the activities get complete, and there is continuity of happiness in the self, and there is conduct completeness of the self also. But in the present state, we have to work to develop the higher activities of the self, isn't it? So how to proceed for contemplation of relationship? How to enter block B1? Okay. And this is where we have to work, because ultimately, unless we are able to contemplate upon the right feeling, we are preconditioned in multiple ways. We are enslaved by sensation, and that's how there is no continuity of happiness in the self. So through lectures 1 to 28, we have been able to develop the understanding of relationship, harmony, and coexistence. And for that only, we detailed upon the activities of the self, we detailed upon the existence, we detailed upon all the orders in nature. And thus we have this clarity, at least at the level of expectation, thought, and even desire, we have this clarity. So now how do we see it experientially? How do we see it through direct observation? And this is what we are trying to do through our practice sessions 1 to 24, through exercises 1 and 2, and later on through exercise 3. But in this course, we have limited ourselves to exercises 1 and 2. So if you look at the program of action at the level of individual, there are 3 programs. One is self-exploration, the second is self-awareness, and the third is self-evaluation. So self-exploration essentially means that the proposal is there in front of us. We start verifying the proposals. We start experientially validating them in our living, isn't it? So we have the understanding of coexistence. At least we have the clarity at the level of thought. We have the feeling and thought of coexistence. And then our behavior, work, and participation get in line with this in the larger order on the basis of understanding of coexistence, harmony, and relationship. So this is something that we have been trying to do at a personal level. Now, with this, we have a self-awareness. We are able to be aware of our desire, thought, and expectation every moment. And when we have this awareness, then we are able to evaluate our desire, thought, and expectation on the basis of our natural acceptance. And that is to say, on the basis of relationship, harmony, and coexistence. And this is something that we can do every moment. So if you look at the program of action at the individual level, so one program is self-exploration, then it is self-awareness, and then self-evaluation. So there are 3 things to be accomplished at the level of individual. Now when it comes to self-exploration, so the proposal is there in front of us, and we need to verify the proposals, experientially validate the proposals so that it becomes a part of our understanding. So through verification, we are able to understand coexistence, or at least have the clarity at the level of thought. And then we are able to ensure the feeling and thought of coexistence, and our behavior, work, and participation is largely based on understanding of coexistence, harmony, and relationship. So this is something that we are trying to do through this course also. And when we are into this process of self-exploration, so we are able to be aware of our desire, thought, and expectation. And this is something that we have been trying to do through our exercises 1 and 2. And this can be done every moment. So every moment we need to be aware of our desire, thought, and expectation. And when the proposal is there in front of us, we are able to explore the proposal, and we are also able to be aware of our desire, thought, and expectation. So what will follow is self-evaluation. So based on the right proposal, we are able to evaluate our desire, thought, and expectation on the basis of our natural acceptance. That is to say, on the basis of relationship, harmony, and coexistence. And this is also something which can be done every moment. And through this, the transformation takes place in our sanskar. And sanskar is the acceptances, all our desires, thought, and expectations summed up together. And through this process of exploration, we are able to transform our sanskar. Basically, if you look at the transformation in the sanskar, so sanskar at the previous moment, the environment as the previous moment, and the self-exploration that we do at the previous moment makes our next sanskar. So this is the way the transformation takes place in our sanskar, and this is what we need to do. So this is the program of action at the individual level. So looking at the program of action at the individual level, which enables our self-evolution. So we might be presently in this state, and from here we have to transform ourselves to this state so that all the activities of the self get awakened. So with the purpose of self-evolution, there is awakening to the activities of contemplation, understanding, and realization, and thus there is purification of sanskar. So the acceptances that we have accumulated at the level of our block B2 in our desire, thought, and expectation get purified in the process. So working for self-development through the practice sessions, we have been doing exercises 1 and 2, and this is something that we'll try to look at again in the lecture. So exercises 1 and 2 we have been doing, and we are doing these exercises for developing ourselves. We are able to develop the understanding, and we are also able to purify our accumulated desire, thought, and expectation, our accumulated sanskar in the process. So we have seen that our target is to live with continuous fulfillment, and to live with continuous fulfillment, we are doing these exercises. Now we have studied in UHV 1 and 2, and we are also doing this investigation in UHV 3, that the basic human desire is continuity of happiness. And we had concluded that in order to ensure continuity of happiness, we have to ensure right understanding in the self, right feeling, and right thought in the self. and also ensure competence or right living with the world outside in our mutual interactions with be the interaction with the human being or the rest of nature. Now, right understanding would mean that we are able to see the complete reality, starting from self to the entire existence. That is, we are able to see the material as well as consciousness submerged in space. That is, we are able to see the material units as well as the consciousness units submerged in space. And this is something to be accomplished in the self by the self. We had also seen that right feeling and right thought of relationship, harmony, and coexistence is to be ensured in the self. And when it comes to develop the competence or right living, so we have to ensure our living in relationship, harmony, and coexistence with the world outside. So with that, when you go to interact with the human being or the rest of nature, or we are going to participate in the larger order, we are able to ensure mutual fulfillment. So with human being, we are able to ensure mutual happiness. And with the nature, we are able to ensure mutual prosperity. And when it comes to participate in the entire nature, we are able to fulfill the human goal. So this is something to be accomplished in terms of competence. So our focus in these exercises has been on the self. This is something that we have been saying again and again. So our major focus, therefore, is on ensuring the right understanding, right feeling, and right thought. So to live with fulfillment, we need to understand, and to understand, we need to see, that is observe, and to see, we need to pay attention, to be mindful. So you can recall how we have been trying to be mindful in our exercises, and we have been trying to pay attention to the reality. So we tend to make mistakes in living with a reality that we do not understand. For example, we tend to make mistakes in living in relationship if we do not understand the relationship. And you can see that there are two important aspects while paying attention. One is the object of paying attention, and the second is the process of paying attention. And the first one is the object of attention, and the second one is the process of paying attention. And you could see that this object of attention is very important, isn't it? So these are the two important aspects. Now, if you look at the object of attention, whatever is to be understood, that is to be lived with. So the entire existence is our object of attention. And if you look at the process of paying attention, so we have to be aware, and we have to also evaluate without reacting. If we react, then we are not able to evaluate rightly, isn't it? So to begin with, we have to be aware first, and when we are able to be aware, then we start evaluating, and then we also start looking into the feeling which is naturally acceptable to us, so that those feelings are ensured in the self. So what is to be understood? So three things to be understood, as we had discussed: consciousness, that is self; material, and to begin with, we can start from the body, and then coexistence. So by way of the following exercises, we are able to observe the reality. So in exercise 1, we are trying to understand the consciousness, that is the self is observing the self. In exercise 2, we are trying to understand the material, that is the self is observing the body, the material. And we briefly touched upon exercise 3 when we looked at the 7th step of exercise 2. And essentially, we are trying to pay attention to the coexistence, the submergence here. Now, existence is units submerged in space. So space is there, units are there, and units are of two kinds: the material units and the consciousness units. The material unit, one example is body. If you look at the consciousness unit, the self is there and the coexistence is there, space is there. So exercise 1 is focused on observing the self. Exercise 2 is focused on observing the material, that is the body. And in exercise 3, which we did not do, and we are just trying to touch upon this, we try to observe the distance between two units. We try to look at the relationship between two units, and that's how we start paying attention to the coexistence. So who is the seer? That is the observer. So self is the seer, not the eyes. The eyes are only an instrument. They are a part of the body. So the self is the seer, the observer. The body, let's say eyes, are only used as an instrument as and when required. So the instrument is not also required every moment. The instrument is required from time to time, isn't it? And this is something that we have been able to observe through our practice sessions. So to see, that is to observe, we have these 3 exercises. 1, seeing the self by the self. 2, seeing the body by the self. And 3, seeing the coexistence by the self. So in exercise 1, the consciousness is observing the consciousness. In exercise 2, the consciousness is observing the material. And in exercise 3, the consciousness is observing the coexistence. And to begin with, it is observing the distance between two units and then the relationship between two units. So the two units could be the self and the body, isn't it? So as you could see that self is not a part of the body, body is also not a part of the self, and self is there at a distance from the body. So we start with observing the distance between the self and the body, and then we go on to see the relationship between self and the body. Now, there are two possibilities. One is living within and one is living with the world outside. So normally we are caught up in the world outside and we keep on paying attention to the things outside. And then we are carried away by the assumptions about relationship, and then we recognize accordingly and fulfill accordingly. So this may be the general case, isn't it? And then we are applying the power of the self somewhere outward. From there we have to come inward. From there we have to come inside. Now going inward would mean that we are trying to look within in the self, and then we are trying to work for knowing, isn't it? So that the assuming is self right. And with this competence, we are able to interact with the world outside. So the right sequence would be that we are able to see within first, then in relationship outside. And when this happens, the knowing guides the assuming, based on which there is recognizing and fulfilling. So we need to apply the power of the self inward. So we start paying attention inward, and when we have this competence that we are able to see whatever is there inward, whatever is there in my imagination, in my natural acceptance, then I'm able to participate with the outer world. And this attention inward, and with that we are able to pay attention outward as and when required. So this is the way the transformation starts. So the attention was outward earlier, we started paying attention inward. When we have the clarity inside, then with that clarity we are able to participate with the outside world. Now talking about exercise 1, so we are observing the self by the self. We are trying to look within. And as we had mentioned earlier also, that this is one way and not the only way to observe the reality. So the steps mentioned in this exercise are one possible set of steps and not the only set of steps, isn't it? So for these observations, do we need to use the eyes to see the self? No, we don't need to use the eyes. Do we need to take any work from the body? No, we don't need to take any work from the body. So we can give rest to the eyes and the body. We can keep them in some comfortable position, and then we can start observing ourselves. And these are the 7 steps that we looked at while we were doing exercise 1. And this is something to be done every moment. So in the first step, we are trying to be aware. We are trying to observe our imagination at this moment. That's the desire, thought, and expectation. And desire essentially means the feeling part. And we saw that if you are not able to see the feeling straight away, then you can look at the thought, and from there you can deduce what was there in your feeling. And one important thing that we said in step 1 is that you just have to observe. Okay, you don't have to react, you don't have to feel upset, you don't have to change or modify or impose any kind of thought upon you, any kind of feeling upon you. You just have to observe. You just have to observe. In second step, we are asking ourselves whether the feeling that we have at this moment is naturally acceptable to us or not, and do we want its continuity. So this is something that we are trying to refer to our natural acceptance, and here we are saying that just observe, and here we are also trying to evaluate. In step 1, we are not trying to evaluate. In step 2, we are trying to evaluate, and without any reaction, we are trying to evaluate. In step 3, you can ask yourself whether you are comfortable, you are in harmony, happy with the feeling that you have at this moment. And here again, just observe and evaluate without any reaction. In step 4, we are saying that who decided the feeling that you have at this moment? Did you decide it, or someone else or some situation outside decided it? So we could see that with some observation, we are able to say that it is me only who decides. But don't assume this. Observe this straight away for you. Observe this directly for you. Once you are clear that you are the one who is deciding, then you can ask yourself, on what basis did you decide the feeling that you have at this moment? So did you decide this on the basis of understanding or on the basis of some assumption? So it may be the case that you are deciding for the feeling within you at this moment based on some assumption. So you start asking yourself, which feelings are naturally acceptable to you? feelings of relationship or opposition, harmony or disharmony, coexistence or struggle. What is acceptable to you naturally? And if feelings of relationship, harmony, and coexistence are naturally acceptable, then there is a need to understand that, isn't it? So we took step 2 in 2 steps. In 6a, we are asking ourselves which feelings are naturally acceptable to us. And in step 6b, we decide that if the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence is naturally acceptable, then there is a need to understand this, isn't it? And in step 7, we are saying that we need to ensure that the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence is there in me all the time, isn't it? And we can see that when these feelings are ensured in us, then we are in a state of continuity of happiness. And this is what is our basic desire. So going from step 1 to step 7, we are trying to observe how, by observing the reality and by evaluating ourselves, we are able to ensure continuity of happiness within us. So it is important to note that when I am able to understand the relationship, harmony, and coexistence in its completeness, then I will be able to decide my feeling, my thought accordingly. And I will always be comfortable within. I will always be comfortable with myself. And when I'm comfortable with myself, I'm happy within. And when I'm happy within, I share the happiness outside. When I'm comfortable within, I behave with others with comfort. I work with comfort, and then I'm able to ensure mutual happiness and mutual prosperity. And this is what we really want to be, isn't it? So this was a summary of all the steps that we went through in exercise 1. So there are some important observations about the steps of exercise 1, something that I shared just now. So in step 1, we have to be aware of the imagination, our desire, thought, and expectation every moment, and to have no reaction. And this is something that can be termed as to observe with equanimity. So without reacting, without trying to stop them, without trying to change them, we are trying to observe our imagination. And in particular, we are trying to observe the feeling. And you saw that this is a very simple but very important step, because all our happiness or unhappiness is an outcome of this imagination, isn't it? In steps 2 and 3, we are trying to be aware as well as evaluate our desire, that is our feeling. So we are trying to see whether we are comfortable with the feeling or not, whether it is naturally acceptable to us or not. And step 4, we are trying to find out who is taking the decision. And the conclusion is that I am taking the decision, I am responsible. And in step 5, we are trying to see the basis for our decision making, whether it is understanding or assumption. And we could conclude that understanding leads to definite and natural feeling, ensuring happiness. And this highlights the need for understanding. So this is something that we are able to accomplish in step 5. In step 6a, we are trying to ask whether opposition or relationship, harmony or contradiction, coexistence or struggle, what is acceptable to us naturally. And the conclusion is that what is acceptable naturally is the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence. And then in step 6b, we are trying to observe and understand the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence. And we are able to conclude that understanding the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence is basically understanding the whole existence. So as we go to understand the coexistence, we are able to see that the whole existence is coexistence. And this completes our awakening to the activity of realization, when we are able to see the whole existence as coexistence. And the conclusion that comes out here is that this will ensure harmony and happiness at this moment, every moment, and in continuity. So at every step, we are able to conclude something. So in essence, what we are trying to do is seeing through direct observation that the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence is acceptable to us naturally. This is something that we concluded in step 6a. And then we are trying to understand these feelings in step 6b. And then we are trying to ensure that it continues in us in step 7. And this will ensure happiness and continuity in the self. However, we are able to accomplish step 6 and 7 when we are able to be aware of our imagination every moment. That is step 1, which was the beginning of this exercise. And we are able to see that we are the one who is taking the decision for my imagination that takes place at step 4. So all these steps are important, isn't it? But finally, we have to be in the state of continuity of happiness. And for that, we have to ensure that we are able to see the relationship, harmony, and coexistence every moment very naturally. So this was about exercise 1. So the most important thing is, in step 1, we are trying to be aware every moment with no reaction, with equanimity. In step 6a, we are observing and verifying that feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence is acceptable naturally. And in step 6b, we are observing and understanding the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence through contemplation, understanding, and realization. And in step 7, we are trying to ensure that our desire, thought, and expectation is always in line with our understanding of relationship, harmony, and coexistence. And this ensures harmony and happiness every moment, which is our ultimate goal. So this is what we are doing in essence in exercise 1. In exercise 2, we are trying to observe, that is, see the body and the interaction between the self and the body. And this way, the consciousness is observing the material. And this is again going to happen by the self. And as we told earlier, that this is just one way of observing the reality and not the only way. So the self is there, the body is there, the two are coexisting. The self is the consciousness, the body is the material, and there is no exchange of material here. There is only exchange of information. The self is sending instructions to the body and receiving sensation from the body. And this is the transaction between the self and the body that is taking place. Now, if you look at the steps of exercise 2, so in step 1, we are observing that you are there through your imagination, and the body is also there, which you are able to observe through your sensation. And the self and the body are two distinct realities. In step 2, we are saying that you have to observe the interaction you have with the body. So observe that you give instructions to the body and receive sensations from the body from time to time as and when required. In step 3, we have to observe who makes the decisions about what instructions are to be passed on to the body and what sensations are to be read from the body. And then you are able to see that it is the self which is giving the instructions and also deciding what sensations to be read from the body. So in step 4, we are saying that you have to find out, are you in the sensation or are you at a distance from the sensation? What is there? So observing this thing, you are able to conclude that you are not the sensation, you are also not in the sensation, but rather you are at a distance from the sensation. But again, this is not to be assumed, but verified by oneself, observed by oneself. In step 5, we are saying that you have to observe that interaction with the world outside is by way of sensation. And you have to observe that it is you who associates a meaning to the sensation. So in step 6, we are saying that you observe how you associate the meaning to the sensation. Observe the role of your sanskar in it. So observe your reaction when you associate the meaning based on assumption, and observe your response when you associate the meaning based on understanding, right understanding. In step 7, we are trying to see the coexistence. We are trying to see that I am there in space, the body is there in space, and I'm interacting with the body through space. So these are the 7 steps of exercise 2. So there are some important observations about the steps of exercise 2. So the details are going to follow, but we can make some important observations here. So in step 1, we are observing the self through the imagination and the body through sensation, and we are able to see that the self and the body are two distinct realities. In step 2 and 3, we are observing the interaction between the self and the body, and we are able to see that it is the self which is sending the instructions to the body, and the body is sending sensations to the self. So in essence, if you see in steps 1, 2, and 3, we are able to see that the self and the body are two distinct realities, and there is transaction of information only. The self is giving instructions to the body and reading sensations from the body. There is no material transaction here. And the decision is every time taken by the self. In step 4 and 7, we can feel that the self is at a distance from the sensation. There is a distance between the self and the body. The self is in space, the body is also in space. The transaction of information between the self and the body also takes place through space. In step 5 and 6, the interaction of the self with the body or the world outside is by way of sensation. This is something that we can observe. And it is the self who associates the meaning to the sensation, is influenced or remains uninfluenced, decides for response based on the sanskar. Depending on sanskar, the self responds or reacts, isn't it? So in essence, we can see that there are two major things to be observed here. In steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7, we are able to see that the self and the body are two distinct realities in space and they are at a distance. And both the way, the transaction of information only through space and the decision is taken every time by the self. In step 5 and 6, we can see that the interaction of the self with the body or the world outside is by way of sensation. It is the self who associates the meaning to the sensation and is influenced or not influenced depending upon the sanskar. So what we see under A is something that remains with me as a part of my understanding. But if you look at B, here we are able to evaluate the sanskar because the meaning that I'm associating to the sensation is based on my sanskar. And this I keep on evaluating, this I keep on observing within me. So we have to keep working on step 5 intensively whenever we are interacting with the body or with the world outside. And we have seen that many people have experienced that they are able to see their sanskar much better through this step 5 than through exercise 1. Because many times we are influenced by the sensations from the body and that triggers our deep preconditionings. So while doing exercise 2, you are able to relate yourself to exercise 1 also. And this dependence on the body for happiness through sensation is a major obstacle in our development. And this is something that we are able to observe, how we are associating the meaning to the sensation that we are getting from the body. So this is something that we had detailed upon. So there are events taking place outside and there are some physiochemical changes or some behavior of the other human being and it has an effect on the body. And this is something which is happening in the self, isn't it? And we test the sensation, we associate the meaning and whether we are influenced or not, that decides whether we react or respond. And then we decide how to express through the body and then the body acts accordingly. So this is something that we had seen in step 5. So we could see that either it is the behavior of the other human being or some physical facility and it has an influence on the body and it causes sensation in the body and the self reads the sensation that it considers important and then it associates the meaning and then decides what to do based on the understanding or assumption whether it responds or reacts and then it passes the instruction to the body as and when required. Now this is step 7. If you see here we are taking a shift, we are trying to observe our being in space. So what we are saying here that I am in coexistence in space, the body is also in coexistence being in space. I transact information with the body through space as and when required and that is dependent on my choice, my decision. So I send instructions to the body through space and read specific sensations from the body through space. So the outside objects have an effect on the body and these effects reach to me in the form of sensations taking place in the body. I observe this directly and while I interact with the body from time to time as and when I decide to do, my being is not dependent. So this is an important thing that I am there. My being is not dependent on the body. It is not dependent on the sensation also. It is not dependent on anything outside also. I am in space. Now through this observation also we can see that if my being is not there on anything outside me, so I am there all the time, isn't it? I am there in space. So I am there, I am related to all, but not dependent. I am responsible towards all. Now when I am able to see that I am related to all, this ensures the feeling of love in me. And when I am able to see that I am responsible to all, this ensures the feeling of compassion in me. And you see that in step 7 here in exercise 2, we are observing certain things which will help us observe the coexistence when you go to do exercise 3. So this is the evolution, the self-development that we have been talking about. And there are 5 steps here. I will not detail upon them. We had discussed about the self-exploration, the self-evolution. And what is desirable is this transformation from animal consciousness to human consciousness. So what we are ultimately working on, if you see, in essence, what we are doing is through exercise 1, we are working to achieve a state of self where I am with awareness of all the activities of the self, particularly my imagination, that is my feeling to begin with every moment without any reaction, with equanimity. And then I'm observing and verifying that feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence is acceptable to me naturally every moment. And then I'm observing and understanding the feeling of relationship, harmony, and coexistence. So I'm able to awaken myself to the activities of contemplation, understanding, and realization in this process. So I'm ensuring that all my desires, my thoughts, my expectations are in line with relationship, harmony, and coexistence. And we are able to ensure at this moment, and we are trying to ensure it every moment. And this ensures continuity of happiness in me, isn't it? So all this put together, it ensures that I'm in a state of continuous happiness. The self is there in the state of continuous happiness, isn't it? And with this state of the self of harmony and continuous happiness, now through exercise 2, we are able to see that the self and the body are two distinct realities. They are in space, they are at a distance, and they are transacting information. There is no material transaction here. And they are transacting information through space, and the decisions are being taken by the self, isn't it? So in step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7, we are able to see that the self and the body are two distinct realities, and they are only transacting information. The interaction of the self with the body or the world outside is by way of sensation. It is the self who associates the meaning to the sensation, is influenced or remains uninfluenced, and decides for the response based on the sanskar. And depending on the sanskar, the self reacts or responds. So this is something that we are trying to do in step 5 and 6. And through this observation, we are able to ensure that while I am interacting with the body or the world outside, not only that I remain in a state of harmony and happiness, but I'm able to respond and not react with the world outside. So we have been talking about the feeling of trust, respect, but still we find that many times we do react in relationship. So through this direct observation, we are able to ensure the right feeling in us. We are also able to see that many times we become unhappy because of some sensation from the body, because we associate some meaning based on our sanskar. So essentially, if you see through exercises 1 and 2, we are trying to intensively transform the self. We are trying to activate the activities of block B1. So this is what we really want to do. This is what we really need to do. So now we'll have some assignment. So the points for self-evaluation here are that you list out your understanding emerging out of exercises 1 and 2. What did you conclude here? How many steps are you able to see in yourself clearly? Are you able to see that happiness is your innate nature, your natural characteristic? It is not some influence from outside. And how clearly you are able to see this? So if you can see that happiness is your innate nature, your natural characteristic, then what is your program to ensure it? So how much of this program is for trying to get favorable effect, some sensation, some feeling from outside, even now? And how much of this program is keeping in focus the self, and how much of this program is keeping in focus the body? So this is something that you can evaluate for yourself. And the next thing that we are saying, that what you can see as your commitment now, how much time can you devote for developing the right understanding, right feeling in the self? How much time can you devote for social responsibility emerging out of natural self-expression along with your present commitments? So at least we can devote 2 hours for each of these. So whether you can devote 2 hours every day for ensuring the right understanding, right feeling within you, and also to participate with the society in terms of ensuring right understanding, right feeling in the society. So the homework is that you continue with exercises 1 and 2. Maybe the course will come to an end, but you are going to continue with these exercises. Key of exercise 1 is the step 1, although it is very simple but very important step, and try practicing it every moment. Practice step 7 of exercise 2. It is the entry point for exercise 3 to experience the coexistence in this existence. So we come to the conclusion of the course now. So it has been a happy journey for me sharing this content with you. And I hope you are going to continue with exercises 1 and 2. You are also going to practice step 7 of exercise 2 so that you are prepared for exercise 3. So today we summed up the whole course. So if you remember, in the previous lecture, we summed up one part of the course, and today we summed up the rest of the lectures. And we also looked at the 2 exercises 1 and 2 briefly. We try to recap all the steps that we have covered in our practice exercises. And I hope this has been quite beneficial to you, and you are going to practice exercise 1 and 2, and you are going to continue with exercises 1 and 2, because this is something that will help you transform. And as we can see that it is essentially the continuity of happiness that we all are striving for. And I hope this course has been useful in fulfilling this need of yours. Thank you all.